The following account was taken from real testimonies. Names and details have been altered for privacy.
I never learned his real name. We started walking together at mile 12, not because we planned to, but because the trail narrowed and neither of us wanted to fall behind. I didn't even notice him at first. Just another hiker on the long road through northern Spain, but by the end, he would become one of the most unforgettable people I've ever met. It was the second week of the Camino route, a long-distance pilgrimage trail I thought would give me time to think. But instead, all it gave me was sore feet, bad blisters, and long hours of silence. Maybe that's why I didn't mind when he started walking beside me. He looked older than me, mid-40s maybe, not rushed, not tired, just steady. He walked with the kind of rhythm people have when they already know how to endure things. He didn't force conversation. In fact, we didn't speak at all for the first 2 hours. Sometimes silence between strangers is uncomfortable, but this one felt natural. It stayed that way until our first break. We stopped at a water fountain. I filled my bottle. He did the same. Then he said the first words I'd hear from him. "Feet okay," I laughed. "Not really." He smiled, just a small corner of the mouth kind of smile, and said, "Wait until mile 30. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. We walked, and we walked through small villages, olive fields, dusty stretches of road where shade didn't exist. Some parts of Spain felt like walking on the surface of the sun. My feet ached, my shoulders burned, but somehow, I kept walking. So did he, side by side, silent most of the time. There's something strange about walking with someone you don't know. Your steps match before your words do. You start to feel time passing differently, not hour by hour, but step by step. At mile 23, he offered me his last piece of fruit. At mile 27, I gave him one of my blister bandages. At mile 30, we started talking. Not about life, not about deep things. Just about socks, bad knees, pain, the trail. Sometimes pain is the best language two people can share. It was only when we reached a small rural town for the night that I realized I never asked his name. And strangely, I didn't feel the need to. We ate dinner at a place that served soup and bread. No phones, no Wi-Fi. Just tired hikers and the quiet satisfaction of surviving another day. Before going to sleep, he said, "Walk at sunrise. Less heat." I nodded. And before I knew it, I found myself hoping he'd walk beside me again. The sunrise on day 2 looked like a painting only exhaustion could appreciate. Orange sky, cool air, the sound of boots on gravel. He showed up again, not with a greeting, just a nod. And we walked, strangers, yet already familiar. After a few miles, I asked, "Why are you walking?" He didn't answer for a while, not because he didn't understand, but because I think he was trying to decide if he wanted to answer at all. Then he finally said, "I needed to do something that has a finish line." That sentence stayed with me, miles and miles after he said it. There's an unspoken rule when you walk for hours with someone you don't know. Eventually, one of you will say something true. It doesn't happen at the start. It doesn't happen on mile 10. It happens somewhere after mile 40. When people are too tired to pretend, he didn't tell me much, just pieces. He used to run marathons. He stopped. He had a family. But he walked alone. He used to pray. But now, he walked instead. And that was enough. Enough to know he wasn't here for travel. He was here for something else. We didn't talk about it, but I could feel it. Grief has a certain pace. It walks slowly, but it always catches up. By mile 60, I knew how he walked just by listening to his steps. I could tell when he needed water, when he was thinking, when he was fighting pain silently, but I still didn't know his name. There's something strangely honest about walking with someone for that long. Names feel unnecessary. You don't need to know who they were before the trail. You just need to know that they won't leave the trail before you're ready to walk alone. We shared very few words, but when we did, they mattered. Once, after a long silent stretch, he said quietly, "Pain feels different when someone walks beside you." I nodded. Because I didn't just understand. I felt it. Sometimes we ate together, sometimes alone. Sometimes we rested in shade we found, sometimes in places with no shade at all. A few kilometers felt like 10, others felt like 1. The road became a living thing, expanding and shrinking with our energy. After a lunch break near an abandoned chapel, he finally asked me a question. Why are you walking? I opened my mouth, but I didn't know what to say. I wasn't escaping anything. I wasn't searching for anything, either. Or maybe I was, but I kept pretending I wasn't, so I just told the truth. I thought I needed time alone, but lately, I don't know if I really want to be alone anymore. He didn't react. He just drank some water, wiped his mouth, and kept walking. But 10 minutes later, he said something I still remember. Most people don't actually need answers. They just need someone to listen while they ask the questions. Pain changes shape when the path goes upward, so does conversation. We faced our first long hill on mile 81, the kind that makes you question every life choice that brought you there. We stopped talking almost entirely. Every breath became precious. Halfway up, I slowed. He didn't. But when he noticed me falling behind, he didn't speed up. He waited. No words, just a quiet pause. A kind of respect you can't ask for, you just receive it, if you're lucky. We reached the top and sat on a rock wall, looking at the valley below. My legs trembled, his didn't. He said only one thing. You don't walk faster by walking alone. Something about that sentence felt bigger than hiking. I didn't reply. I just let the wind answer for me. At mile 94, we finally saw the sign. 6 kilometers left. Most travelers would get excited. But we both stopped walking, not to rest, not for water. But because it suddenly hit us, the end had arrived. And our strange, wordless companionship had an expiration point stamped on it. I looked at him and felt a question rise in my chest, a question I didn't really want to ask. Do we finish the last miles together? He didn't answer with words. He just turned his face toward the road and started walking, not alone, not ahead, beside me. The final miles felt heavier than all the others. Because when strangers walk together long enough, they stop being strangers. We didn't rush the final stretch. The trail was quiet, not because there were no birds or wind, but because everything had slowed down inside us. It wasn't just a road anymore, it was an ending. At mile 98, he stopped at an old stone well. He washed his face, took a long breath, and finally said something unexpected. Do you think we'll forget this? I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something. We had walked nearly 100 miles together. We never asked each other's names. We never exchanged contacts. We never took a photo. We never tried to keep the moment. And maybe that was why it felt real. I don't think we will, I said. Because we won't try to. He nodded. That's the only way something stays. The end of the trail wasn't dramatic. No crowd, no medal, just a sign, a marker, an unspoken understanding that the walk was officially over. We stopped, not because we were tired, but because endings require attention. He sat on a low wall. I sat next to him, my legs ached, my shoulders burned. But the silence felt peaceful now, different from the first day, not empty, full. I finally asked, will you keep walking somewhere else? He looked ahead and said, maybe, but now I don't need a finish line anymore. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but now I do. People expect goodbyes to have words, maybe even tears. But when we reached the point where our paths separated, there was no speech, no explanation, no promise to meet again. He simply held out his hand. I held mine out too. Not a handshake, not a hug, just a steady grip. From two people who walked beside each other long enough to understand. Names don't matter, footsteps do, and just like that. He turned left, I turned right. And we walked away. That was how I met the stranger who walked beside me for 100 miles. People think endings are loud, celebrations, farewells, final words. But sometimes they happen quietly, with a single step in a different direction. That's how he left. One step. Left turn. Gone. I didn't look back, not because I didn't care, but because sometimes looking back feels like trying to keep something that was never meant to be kept. Still, for the next hours, I felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't loneliness. It was balance. Almost like those 100 miles had adjusted something inside me, slowly, silently, without permission. There's a rhythm to walking alone after you've walked beside someone. Your steps feel louder. Your breathing feels heavier, but, strangely, it doesn't feel empty. It feels earned. The next weeks were quieter. I stayed in hostels, ate with other travelers, slept in shared rooms where people packed their bags at 5 a.m. and never spoke again. That's a normal rhythm of life on the trail. But I noticed something had changed in me. I listened more. I complained less. I no longer felt the need to talk about myself, and that silence made room for others. One night, a young hiker from Denmark sat across from me at dinner. She looked tired, the kind of tired that had nothing to do with walking. She didn't speak much, just ate slowly, eyes down. So I asked her a simple question: "How's your day?" She stared at her food for a few seconds, then said, "Harder than I hoped, better than I feared." I recognized that sentence, not the words, but the feeling. It was a sentence people say when they're trying to keep something inside, and for a moment, I felt like I was in mile 50 again, walking next to someone, carrying something invisible together. I didn't try to give advice, I just said what my stranger once told me. Pain feels different when someone walks beside you. Her eyes lifted. She didn't speak, but she didn't have to. That was the night I realized something important. The stranger didn't just walk beside me. He taught me how to walk beside others. The trail ended. Life resumed. That's the thing about long journeys. Eventually, you return to whatever you left behind. But something in you doesn't walk the same way anymore. A year later, I got a message from a fellow hiker I'd met along the way. "I think I met your walking partner today. The quiet guy. Mid-40s, always looked forward when he walked. Didn't catch his name. Said he once walked with someone for 100 miles. Said it helped him get unstuck. Said he hopes you're still walking." That message stopped me, not because it surprised me, but because of that last line. He hopes you're still walking. Maybe that's what real connection is. Not constant contact, not long conversations, but knowing someone out there is walking their road, and quietly hoping you're walking yours too. He never told me his name. He never told me his pain. He never gave advice. He just walked and let walking be enough. And from him, I learned this. Some people enter your life quietly and still leave an echo. Some roads are walked with boots, and others with memory. Some strangers stay strangers and still change the way you move through the world. Maybe the point was never to know him. Maybe the point was simply to walk beside him, long enough to learn that I didn't have to walk alone. That was what happened when the stranger walked beside me for 100 miles. Not all journeys need a destination, some just need company. Months later, I found myself walking again, not on the Camino, not on any marked trail, just outside my city after a long day. I didn't plan to walk far, I just needed air. But after a few minutes, I realized something familiar. My steps were matching another pace, not beside me, but inside me. That rhythm, that steady breathing, that quiet acceptance of pain. It was him. He wasn't there, of course. But something about that season of walking beside him had imprinted itself in me. A pace you don't forget, even when your feet stop moving. It made me realize, some people don't stay in your life, but they stay in how you live it. That night, I walked 5 miles, not because I had to, but because every step felt like remembering someone, without needing to speak their name. People often ask for maps, for routes, for certainty. But walking teaches you something the world rarely admits. A map only tells you where to go. Pain tells you why you're going, and sometimes, a stranger shows you how to keep going. Not with a speech, not with a lesson, but with footsteps beside yours, until your pace remembers what strength feels like. I thought a map would guide me. Instead, a stranger did. A friend once asked me, "Do you think meeting him was fate?" I told her something that surprised even me. Fate didn't make us meet. Fate made us walk far enough to let a stranger make a difference. Maybe that's the secret of travel. You don't meet people because of destiny. You meet them because walking 100 miles alone makes you ready to see them when they appear. And when they do, you don't ask their name. You ask yourself why the silence between you already feels familiar. Sometimes, when I walk alone now, I do something unconsciously. I slow down just a little, so someone behind me, or ahead of me, could match my pace, if they needed to. I didn't realize this change until one day, a traveler asked me, "Can I walk next to you for a while?" I simply nodded, and said what I once heard at mile 12 feet, "Okay." That's when I understood something important. The stranger didn't just accompany me. He taught me how to be that stranger for someone else. Sometimes, that's the real journey. Not the 100 miles behind you, not the destination ahead, but the ability to walk beside someone, without needing to own the moment. Define the bond, or name the connection. Because that kind of walking remains, even when the road ends. I once thought journeys were measured by distance, that the finish line was just a place you arrive. But after 100 miles beside a stranger, I learned that some roads don't end when your feet stop walking. They end when your heart understands why you walked at all. He never told me his name, but he left something more important. The reminder that we don't need to walk alone, even when life makes us believe we should. Some people stay for years and change nothing. Some walk beside you for a few days, and something shifts forever. We walked 100 miles together, and even now, when I walk alone, sometimes I still match his pace, not because I miss him, but because somewhere along the road, I became someone who no longer fears walking beside a stranger. That was the real journey. That's what those 100 miles were for. That's what happened when a stranger walked beside me. Some footsteps pass you, some footsteps follow you. But the ones that walk beside you change the way you walk forever. The end.